We wanted to mention a very fundamental yesod that we can take from this beautiful holiday that's known as Purim, and maybe sometimes, unfortunately, too short. The Tzidkas Tzaddik, that's Rav Tzadok, a Kohen, writes in Reish Nun Hey, that we all know that the Gemara in Megillah says in Daf Yud Gimel, Amud Beis, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Magdim the Refuah L'Makkah. He always takes care of us before the Makkah actually comes around. One of the examples that the Gemara brings of being Magdim the Refuah L'Makkah is the Maisa with Bigtan B'Serish, as we all know that Mordechai Tzaddik knew all 70 Lashonis. They didn't realize he knew all the languages, that he started talking Persian in front of him. And little did they know that he was Sephardi. He knew Arabic also, and by understanding the Lashon, he was able to figure out what they were talking about. And as we all know, he saved Achashverosh, which in turn eventually led to the fact that Achashverosh wanted to give him Hakar Satov, and Haman led him on a horse. I take it I don't have to explain to you the whole story. Al Kopanim, the question is, why is this a Hagdama of Refuah L'Makkah? What does this have to do with the price of tea? First of all, that whole episode with the horse didn't really help much. And what kind of refuah was this? There was no real refuah in the fact that he was able to save Achashverosh. They'd be able to save Achashverosh. That is the question that needs to be addressed. And the answer is, of course, we're going to go Jewishless, that the answer to this question is with another question. The biggest question on the board, and this should really bother everyone, is why in heaven's name did Mordechai try to save Achashverosh? This guy was a good for nothing. He was a Rasha Gomor. He had his wife under shackle and chain in the castle. Of course he would want Achashverosh die. Now, why this guy should drop dead and get killed? Let them poison him, let him get rid of him, and take your wife and run. Why is he interested in saving him? It didn't make any sense. Of course, we try to be good people and not try to get people killed, but if something's about to happen, this tyrant is in the way, and he's acting the way he's acting, let him get put away. There was nothing to do. He's also a goy. There's a din of ein malim ve'ein moridim. You don't have to take care of a goy when he's going through a difficult time. So he explains with a big yesod, and this is the yesod we want to expand on, and that is that Paras, Persia, is the midah of Tzaras Ayin. The klipa of Tzaras Ayin. Every ummah, every nation has its own midah. The midah of Persia is Tzaras Ayin. Tzaras Ayin means selfishness, being completely into myself, focusing on everything that has to do with me. Persia is always referred to as the dove, the bear. Now we know a bear is complete bal taiva. The yesod of a bear is he's always chasing after his taiva. He's not there for the kill stam. He's there because he's always chasing the taiva. He never has enough. He's always chasing around, and that's why it makes sense. The Megillah opens up its opening scene with a Suda that lasted over a week. Every type of taiva under the sun was there. It was a Suda that had to do with a tremendous amount of drinking, every type of food under the sun, keritzoin ish va'ish. It was a suda that had to do with women. It had to do with everything that had to do with chasing their taivas, with no end to the beginning, with no end from one end from one end of the universe to the next. Everything was there to be able to just get as much as you can. And if you notice, the reason why we got punished was because we were nehenem suda Achashverosh, not because we went to Achashverosh to the suda, because he actually had hano, the focus of hano, because that is the klipa of Persia. The klipa of Persia is the Tzaras Ayin, the focusing on myself, trying to keep things away from everybody else, trying to get as much as I can from my own taivas, as it has to do with everything that has to do with as much as I can take for myself in order to take care of them. And the only way to take care of a klipa like that is being a toiv ayin, having some positive vibe, trying to help someone else, trying to be a nedivus lev, trying to give as much as I can for someone else. That's how you're magdim refuah l'makkah. If the makkah comes as a result of a tzaras ayin, and that's what we did, we made a mistake by eating from the suda of Achashverosh to go ahead and have a na in our selfish ways, to focus on a tremendous amount of what. The only way to take care of it is by a nedivus slave, and Mordechai knew the secret, and that's why it's called being magdim refuah l'makkah, because he put this refuah of going in and helping another person, even though he didn't like Achashverosh, even though he had a tremendous amount of negiyas for, a lot of prejudice, a lot of reason not to go help this man, let him die. But still he went out and used the power of Toivas Ayin, of trying to be positive for someone else, not to focus on my interests, but to focus on Yena, to focus on someone else in order to save him. And that was the Nakuda of the refuah over here. That was the place of salvation. And because of that, we were able to succeed in the end. That's how we were able to succeed in the end. You notice the whole time, how did Haman be able to pull this whole shtick? With money. Not enough with drinking, with women, also with money also. Everything had to do with money, how much money he gave over to him. Everything was focused on being megalgil, suffering. The Gemara even says that in the end he gave him money back, but it didn't make a difference as long as they switched around some finances. They went from one place to the next. They were happy. They were happy with that. It reminds me of the old Persian joke that they say. There were two of them that were walking. And one says to the other, if you eat this grasshopper, I'll give you $1,000. So the guy says, okay. He ate the grasshopper and he gave him $1,000. They kept walking and they continued later. And then the guy saw another grasshopper. And the guy who had a stomach ache, he wasn't feeling good. So he wanted to get it back. He said, I tell you what, you eat this grasshopper and I'll give you $1,000. He said, okay, no problem. And he ate the grasshopper. And then he gave him back the $1,000. And they both had stomach aches. And they were both saying to each other, look what happened. We both have stomach aches, don't feel well. And we ended up in the same status quo. We got the same money back to where it was supposed to go. They said it doesn't matter. The main thing is that we were able to interact between each other with the money. That's all that matters. And this is the idea of the Persians. They're only focused on just to have a little bit to touch the greens, to be able to touch a little bit of money, to be able to chase their taivas, to be able to get as much as they can. And that's why they represent this klipa that we call what is the dove of Tzaris Hain. So why are we mentioning this? Because here's the message of the day. Who is the person, who is the superhero in our story? Of course, we know the biggest superhero in our story is Esther. Esther is the one who was able to get us out of the situation. And if that's true, then how was she able to do it? What was her capabilities? It must have came to go neged this klipa, to be the biggest of the nasanim, the biggest noitan, the one who can give at its peak, to be able, the one who's able to give to the most. And here we have this Esther. She's quiet all the time. Loma gedim aladeteya. She's always quiet. She always does whatever Mordechai tells her. In the time of Tamuke Noshim, she's lo mevakeshes klum. She doesn't ask for anything. She's always staying still and stim, and she's not asking for her own interest, not trying to take. But there's one point that reaches the climax, something that probably stands alone in almost all of Nach, and that is when she goes ahead and takes her own initiative, takes a yuzma, and she goes and tells everyone to fast for 3 days, and she says, I'll go into the castle and I'll go to Achashverosh, and as we all know, they have her popular words that she says, Ukasher avadati, avadati. Now, simply speaking, it could mean that she says, maybe I'm going to die, and you know what, there are many Jews that died al Kiddush Hashem, and it's an incredible thing, not something that we could all stand up to, but that wouldn't be something that would be stand at a claim. What stands at a claim is how the Gemara explains, what does it mean, Kasher avadati, avadati? She went, until now, she was karka oilam. Until now, every time she was with Achashverosh, when she had relations with him, she was completely honest. She was raped. It was against her will. She was not interested. And therefore, she remains permitted to her husband. As we all know, a woman who b'rtzona, from her interest, goes with another man at the time that she's married, becomes usher to her husband forever. Also to the person that she's with, and also to the husband. And here it is that she says that I am now going to go to the king, and it most likely will mean that I will have to be together with him, and by being together with him, that means it was my fault. I wasn't a karka oilam. I'm doing it out of what we call my own initiative, my own yuzma, and as a result of that, kasher avadati, from myself, I will, just like I will be lost from all of Klal Yisrael, I will be lost from you. In other words, she told Mordechai that yes, I'm going to end up becoming usher to you forever and ever. A tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. And we have to understand how great this Mesiras Nefesh was, because let's remember, Esther was a Yesoima, she was a Yatoma from the age 0, from the time that she was a little girl. She knew no parents, she had nothing to do, her family situation was nil, she didn't have any siblings, she was a person who was completely Yatoma. She had only one person in her life, and that was Mordechai. Mordechai, who was also the Gadol Ador, Mordechai, who according to one sheet in the Gemara was her husband, and that was her whole life from the beginning to the end. Of course, she expected to have children with this man, who would eventually be, he was sitting on the Sanhedrin, and they would also sit on the Sanhedrin. They would be Yerush, their father's Yerusha. If she would be able to have children with them, he was the Gadol Ador, and they would be able to continue and have children which are Gdolei Ador, Kal V'chomer, they should be Jews. And here he is, as it is, not only does she give up the last person, the last family member that she has in her whole entire life, and she has to be completely annulled from no type of family life, she's stuck with this dove, with this big bear, this big ugly man that she has to be inside of a castle with forever. Not only that, any children that she has, and eventually she will have, Koresh Daryava, she will have children who are officially Jewish, but as we all know, they act like Goyim, they act in all types of ways as a Goy, and she'll be stuck in this castle with this person with no children that act in the type of thing. That is a Mesiras Nefesh al Mamish. To be able to give up your whole life, give up your whole family, give up everything yourself, and for what? For what reason? For Klal Yisrael. In order to save Klal Yisrael, she did it. There's a famous line from the Kotzker. The Kotzker always had great one-liners, and one of the sayings says, "It's nishkin kunz. It's not a big deal to be moiser nefesh al kiddush Hashem, to die al kiddush Hashem. That's not the kunz. The kunz is lichyot al kiddush Hashem, to live al kiddush Hashem. What all these Arabs, crazy Arabs, are doing and dying and killing themselves is not the big deal, because they're doing it because they have nothing to live for anyways. They're just dying for nothing." But a person who lives al kiddush Hashem, a person who's moiser nefesh and does things while he's still alive and gives up because he knows it's the right thing to do, that's a midah. That's a midah that we learn from Esther. That's the koach of Esther and what we learned from her. Where did she get this koach from? Where's the makor? Where's the source of Esther having such incredible koach? Well, let's go from Nach to Tanakh. We'll go to the Torah, and we all know that Rachel Imenu did an incredible thing. I don't have to go through the whole story with Rachel Imenu, but what we do know is that Yaakov Avinu loved her. And what that meant by loving her is that not only was he planning on marrying her, everybody knew there was supposed to be a Shiftei Ka, 12 Shvatim. Everyone knew there was 12 children. And Rachel said, "Oh, the Shiftei Ka are going to be mine, just like there was a Sarah, just like there was a Rivka, there will be a Rachel. I will be the source of all of Klal Yisrael." This is an incredible phenomenon, to be one of the Imanos of Klal Yisrael, to be the source of all the 12 Shvatim that eventually will be the source of the Yorshim of Eretz Yisrael. This will be a memory that will be forever, and this will be a schut that I can have forever. What an incredible ma'amad, an incredible position for Rachel to have. And that's what was meant to her. But unfortunately, we know about her trickster father and all the switcheroonies that he did, and the Mesiris Nefesh that we all know and are so familiar with, that in order to avoid her sister, her dear sister, her older sister, from being embarrassed, who was really kind of meant for Esav, but in the end of the day, she became the wife of Yaakov Avinu. Why? Because Rachel Imenu was moitzer the Simonim. She gave over all the Simonim, and she let her take her place. It wasn't just an idea of giving over my Baal, giving over the husband. She also knew at that stage that she was being makriv, being the aim of Klal Yisrael. The 12 Shvatim were now going to be in place and given over to Leah, and as we know, most of them were by Leah. And not only that, she didn't know if she would be able to have any of these Shvatim now that Leah will intercede. Now that Leah becomes in front, takes the place, she ends up getting to a stage of, you know what? Kasher avadati. She ended up giving up a status quo that she could have kept. Why? Not to embarrass her sister. And that's the incredible midah of Rachel that comes. And you know who was the Yorish of Rachel? You know that Yorish is of Rachel? Well, don't forget, Esther and Mordechai are from Shevet Binyamin. They're ancestors of Binyamin, and we know Binyamin are one of the two children that belong to Rachel. In other words, Esther was able to chap that koach, to be able to get that koach from her great-grandmother, that we call Rachel, and it came from that koach of being able to focus on the truth, to do what's right, in order to do it even if it comes at the expense of myself. And with this we have a tremendous understanding and a much deeper understanding into what's known as what Chazal tells us, that the schus of the tznius of Shel Rachel ended up going to the tznius of Esther. Esther ended up having the tznius of Rachel. Now, what does it mean when we talk about being tzanua? Now, of course, all of us who go to Beis Yaakov will assume it means, obviously, it talks about knees and elbows, and that's what it has to do with. But it can't be only that. It can't stop there. Because over there it talks about the tznius of Shaul HaMelech. We weren't worried about how well-dressed Shaul HaMelech was. That's not the question. The midah of a tzanua, when we talk about the source of a midah of who is a tzanua and what does a tzanua mean, is one who does what's right because it's the right thing to do. He's koifef rosh. He humbles his head into the status of what's emet. Because when a person knows what the right thing to do is, he's willing to do what's proper to do because that's what needs to be done. That's a tzanua, a person who's willing to take away his own personal ritzoynus, ishim, his own interest, in order to be able to do what the right thing to do is, or in order to do what can help someone else in order for the sake of helping that other person. One of the nafkaminas of that is to dress properly. Dressing properly is not what tznius is, it's a byproduct, it's a totza'ah of the midah of tznius. Because when a person wants to do what's right and he's willing to humble himself, so a woman, even if she's a very pretty woman or an attractive woman, and sometimes a woman, as we all know, wouldn't mind if a person takes a second look. It gives her a certain feeling of accomplishment, of importance, but she's willing to give that up. She's willing to cover that up in order to do what she feels is the right thing to do, A. And B, in order to avoid being machshil, putting a stumbling block in front of another man, in front of someone else that will give that second look. That's a person who's a tzanua, meaning they're acting in tznius because they're being makriv, they're giving up their own personal interest in order to do what the emes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from me is. And that's a midah, that's a godless midah, that's a beautiful midah, that's a Yiddish midah, and that's what we're begging for, that we should be trying to chaparainan in these days when we're surrounded by the opposite. We live in a door with no busha, with no embarrassment, because they could care less about anybody, about themselves. The capitalistic, democratic way of thinking is oh so interconnected with how well they dress, or how well they don't dress, more or less. Because it has to do with focusing on myself. I'm only interested in people putting their eyes on me for what can be done, and I don't care about what happens to you. That's not what makes a difference. It's so interconnected. B'schus the tznius of Rachel Imeinu, her focus on knowing what's right, she was willing to give up the simanim, to give up a Klal Yisrael, being the mother of Klal Yisrael, because she knew that was Ratzon Hashem. She knew I had to do what the right thing is. B'schus that she got an Esther that was willing to give up her last connection with her last person in her whole family. She was willing to lock herself up in a castle till the end of days. She was willing to give up any types of children with any type of future. Instead of having Talmidei Chachamim, she has to have pseudo goyim that she's going to give birth to. But she did it all. Why? Because that's the Ratzon of Hashem, that's the right thing to do. That's the schus of the tznius. And that's what she proclaimed. Kasher avadeti. She was willing to give it up because she knew that that was the right thing to do. And this, of course, goes back to the koach of Esther. That's why she was able to be mitgaber over this dove, over this bear. The midah paras, the whole midah that we see in Purim, and what lies behind it is the idea of a tzaras ayin, selfish, focusing on myself, my personal interests, instead of helping someone else. And who is the superhero that was able to save us? Who was the one that put on the red cape and was able to get us out? The one that was kol kulei tavas ayin, the one that only focused on one thing, on what I could do to help someone else, to help Yeda, to help Klal Yisrael, to help someone else, even if it came at the akrav of myself, an absolute sacrifice. And again, we're not talking about sacrifice of life. We're talking about sacrifice of zich, of myself, of who I am. That's the level that we have to take. And it makes so much sense when we look at all the mitzvahs in Purim. Over and over again, every mitzvah, of course, we know, only focus on the idea of a toivus ayin. I don't have to talk about mishloach manot, matanos lev one after the other. The Ben Ish Chai even writes on mishloach manot, don't give it to your best friend. That's not what mishloach manot is about. Give it to the guy you don't like. That's the real mishloach manot. Give it to that neighbor that bothers you. Give it to that person that you really have a chip on your shoulder. That person, that family member you haven't spoken to in 3 months. That's the person you should be giving mishloach manot, because this is the time of nesina, of being makriv of yourself, of giving up of yourself to give to someone else, to be able to focus on someone else instead of focusing on yourself. Get off your agendas and start giving over to someone else. We know that the Ramah Paskins in Simon Tafrei Sadi Dalid, Kol HaPoshet Yadoi, that if anyone goes ahead and stretches out his hand, you're supposed to give him. Usually during the whole year there's an inyan to make a cheshbon. You should pay attention, first of all, 10-20%. But besides that, there's also an inyan to check before you give tzedakah to a certain extent. No, don't overcheck. Because when you're giving meiser money, you're a gabait tzedakah. You have to take a chrayut, you have to take responsibility for your money. You can't just give it away to some shnek, some guy who's going to stop and take another drink, or use it on drugs. You have to make sure it's going to be used for the proper purposes. On Purim, no such cheshbonis, because kol poshet yadoi ala echyono. If we know in this world to be able to give to anyone who asks, then the Kadosh Baruch Hu in the upper worlds will give to anyone who asks. This is the time, as the Nesiva Shalom writes, and with this we finish, of venahapachu. It's a midah v'nahapachu. Any gzera that was upon you, this is the time to ask, to turn it around. The Kadosh Baruch Hu turn it around. If we give to everyone, the Kadosh Baruch Hu will give whatever we request. It's a time with no cheshbonos. It's a time when we just kulei give. It's a toivus ayin. I love you. You're another Jew, and we care about you. You're my brother. I don't make any cheshbonos. If I'm related to you, then you know I'm going to help you. It doesn't make a difference why or how or if. It's just going to be done. And that's what we do on Purim also, to be able to give in any type of situation. And with that, we'll be able to be mevatel any type of gzeira that happens. We'll be able to apply v'nahapachu. And of course, with this, we understand in our current events the dove that is the source of all our problems. As we all know, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthim, all of these terrorists are supported by ach v'rak, by one and only person, that big dove, Persia. Persians are the ones that behind everything. Iran is the problem that's behind everything that we're surrounded by. They're the ones who are dedicated to the absolute destruction of Bnei Israel. As I one time heard that one of the Persian people say, there's one thing that we agree with the Medinat Yisrael. Well, there's one thing we agree. We both agree there's no such thing as a two-state solution. That's what we both agree. It's a question of all or nothing. That's what they're in. And their focus is only in the absolute destruction of us, and that's why they're supporting everything that it can do. The one time, it's a time of an ahapachu. Let's take a turn. Let's try to make a switch. Let's go and make the gzeira come, and that comes only, yes, and that's the bitui that's all over the place here in Eretz Yisrael, biyachad and netzeach, to work together, to be able to give avas chinam, to be able to give as much as you can without making a cheshbon, to be able to look at your friend and to be able to see what can I do. That new guy that walks into the shul, to give him a nice pat on the back, to say hello, to be able to go. That guy that you didn't like, or that you don't like, or that you've had a chip on your shoulder for a long time, it's time to make amends. It's time to make things change. And if you do that, then we'll be able to reach the koach that we're supposed to get on this day. More than just saying it, but to live it, the koach of an ahapachu. Have a Purim Sameach.